Welcome to my annual video where I share my favorite Christian fiction books I've read in the last year. Now, I have done this, I think, since 2020. I always, when I do this video, leave the list of all the previous year's videos on this topic in the description, but every year I take some time to look back on my last reading year from July to July, and I tell you my favorite Christian fiction reads from that time span. This year, I have the least amount of books on this list that I've ever had before. And I think that's because I'm getting a little pickier. I haven't read as much Christian fiction, and a lot of the Christian fiction I've read, depending how you categorize it is the thing, I've read a lot of fantasy this last year. And I do think in my mind that Christian fantasy is fantasy written by a Christian author where light triumphs over darkness. But I'm not going to include those in this video. In this video, I want books that are easy examples of Christian life. And by easy, I just mean you don't have to like analyze a book or, you know, see the analogies like you would in a fantasy book. These are, I think, all contemporary books, if I remember my list correctly, and they all have very strong faith elements. Some of them are very dark at times. Some of the characters go through really hard things. Sometimes they doubt, but the ending is always a light wins out, faith wins out kind of story. So I just want to preface this video with that information. And like I said, I have not read as much this year as I normally do in this genre, or the ones that I have read haven't made it onto the list. I'm hoping for next year I can increase this, but here are the best ones I've read in the last year. Oh yeah, just looking at my list, I thought there was 6 books on the list. There's only 5 books this year. That is definitely the least ever. And some of my previous videos doing this, I have shared fantasy books, but I'm not going to this time. I think I'm going to have a different video in the future that is good fantasy books written by Christian authors, but this is not that video. So 2 of the books are from the same series, so why don't we just start with those. The first one here is Twice Sold Tales. This is book 1 in the Bookstrings series by Shatona Havig, and I've also got Clock Tower Bound, but which is book 2. I don't know why I stumble over this title every single time. So we'll start with Twice Sold Tales. I read the 2 novellas before this. I highly recommend doing so, but in this series we follow a man named Milton. He makes his money by helping businesses get out of debt. And in the Bookstring series, he is helping bookstores get out of debt. So in book 1, we follow a girl named Harper. She has inherited her bookstore from her, I think it's her great aunt, and Harper likes a lot of things to do with books, isn't the most business savvy, let's say, and is doing a lot of things wrong. And so it's so fun to see Milton come in and help her out. There are some faith elements in here that are really strong, like I've said before. I love that we alternate between 3 different main characters, and so depending whose chapter it is, there is a, I don't know what they're called, a little thing above the chapter. So Harper's are always something bookish. This one says bedtime, book time. Then there's a character named Noah who has suddenly become the parent of a 7-year-old. So his are always parenting tips. Parenting tip number 33, never underestimate the cruelty of children. And then we also get Milton's chapters in here. Let's see if I can find, yeah, his are the most dangerous because each of those chapters start with a book recommendation. So there was a lot of books in here that I ended up writing down as recommendations of books that I want to read. Shatona's books do that to you, especially this Bookstrings series. So if you like books and books about books, this is a great one. And then in book 2, which you don't have to read them in this order, Milton kind of mentions people from like previous books a little bit, but, and they might be slightly spoilery, but if you don't know it, you might not notice it. But they're very separate stories. So in this one, he goes and helps a character. Her name is Cézanne. She goes by Anne. She very much channels Anne of Green Gables with her hair. If you've watched Darling Desi online, she's very much like Anne of Green Gables crossed with Darling Desi. So Cézanne used to have a bookstore with her best friend. They had a bit of a blow up, and Anne decided to move across the street and start another bookstore. And it's a small bookstore. And so, or a small town, I mean. So they're not, like, their town can't really support two bookstores. Plus there's this whole awkwardness of the whole town knowing that there's a feud going on between these two owners. Milton comes in, and because this one has to do with friends that are in a fight, there are a lot of elements of forgiveness and different things like that going on in here. I really enjoyed the Anne vibes from this, and the idea of romanticizing your life in a not in a way where you're dissatisfied with your life, but just finding ways in your everyday life to make things more beautiful. I really took that away from this book. Very much enjoyed it, very much enjoying the series. I have not heard if Shatona is writing more books in the series, where this is going. I need to check in on that because loving these. And then surprisingly, the other three books I don't own. So a new to me author, this was the first book that I've read by her, is What Happens Next by Christina Suzanne Nelson, I believe. This one is a bit of a mystery. I have a hard time categorizing it. Like, it's Christian fiction, it's contemporary mystery-ish, slightly suspense-ish in parts, kind of historical in parts because we flash back a bit. So we follow a woman who, she has a podcast about, I always forget what the podcast is about. I can't remember. She has a podcast. Years and years ago, when she was a preteen-ish, she spent one summer with her grandmother. Her family was living at her grandmother's house. She ended up having a best friend for the summer that lived on the street. At the beginning of the book, this main character gets approached by that girl's sister, and the sister says, oh, what's her name? I'm so bad at character names. Disappeared right after you moved away after that summer. And our main character is like, what? She disappeared? I never knew that. So we flash back and forth between present day with our character and that summer that they spent together. And she tries to figure out like what happened that summer. She goes back to the town and tries to figure out what happened, where her friend disappeared to. And I ended up only giving it 4 stars on Goodreads. And this is what happens. Some books that are 4 stars right after I'm done end up being 5 stars a few months later. Sometimes a book that I rate 5 stars in the moment, I forget about, and it actually kind of ends up being more of a 4-star book because I'm an emotional reader. And I think that the author took this where it needed to go, but I was also hoping for something else, hence why I gave it 4 stars. But I think what she did is better. I'm trying to say stuff without giving any spoilers. Yes, and I want to read more of her books. I actually have another one out from the library. We'll see if I can get to it before it goes back. But she has a few other books that I want to read. And then we have another Amanda Cox book. Hers always make me feel a lot of emotion. So this one is He Should Have Told the Bees. This one, unlike her other ones, has a bit more of the typical Christian romance thing going on, which I appreciate that her other ones were not so much like that. In this one, we follow 2 women who end up getting named in this man's will. The man is the father of one of the women, and the other woman has never heard of him. And so we follow these 2 women with their lives and the things that are going on, and them trying to come together and figure out like what's going on, why are we both named in the will. And the one character, the daughter to the man, lived on the farm. She still lives on the farm where her father was, and they had bees, hence the title of the book. And she really struggles with a lot of anxiety. Even like leaving the farm is very anxiety inducing for her. And my daughter was going through a time of high anxiety when I was reading this book. So it really hit home when I was reading some of those like panic attacks and stuff that happen in the book. So for that reason too, it's like, it was definitely a perfectly timed book in many ways. I really enjoy her writing, and she just announced another book that has something to do with birds or birding, and I'm so there for that. I am in my old lady birding stage 100%. And the last book, you guys, I did not see this coming. Did you watch my romance video from a week or two ago? Authentically Izzy. I'm putting it on here. I don't normally read romance, but this one was told in letters, in emails to characters. Well, I mean, you've got like the love interest relationship thing there, and then our main character is also emailing like her different cousins and stuff who are like siblings to her. And I really appreciate how Pepper Basham had faith elements in there for sure, but at the same time they were quite low-key in the way that I think a lot of non-Christians could pick up this book and really enjoy it and get those faith elements in there in a way that's not like too heavy-handed for them, but they're there and maybe will raise questions and some seeking. I like it when I like it when they're like blatant about their Christian beliefs too, for sure. But the romance world is such a popular genre. It's just like its own thing. And so if Christian authors can be put in there and have no spice and have faith elements, I think it can appeal to both markets and then hopefully make people curious about faith. So this one is about a woman whose cousin has put her on a dating site, and she starts getting weird responses, as one probably would. I wouldn't actually know. But then she eventually finds someone that has some interests that are similar to her, and she's also corresponding with her cousins, and it's just a lot of fun. I don't know at this point if I will continue the series. I said in that video, if my library got in the physical copies for the rest of the series, I would possibly check them out at some point, but I don't care enough to read the ebooks or buy the books, so we will see. And yeah, that is the video. That is all I have read for really good Christian fiction that is not fantasy. That's like the least ever. So if you guys have some good recommendations, apparently I am missing some really good recommendations. I could use some. But if you're looking for more ideas, go ahead and check out my past videos, because there's a lot more ideas there, some of which are even fantasy. So thanks for hanging out with me today.